Welcome to Love Lies Chronicles. The moment she uttered those words, I knew something in my world had shattered. It's only business, honey. Her voice was steady, cold, devoid of any emotion, as if she were discussing a stock trade rather than destroying our marriage. I stood there in disbelief, the penthouse windows behind her casting long, golden reflections of the city skyline. The very empire I had helped her build, the one we once dreamed of together, now felt like a prison where I was the only one being locked out. I swallowed, trying to steady my voice. What the hell are you talking about, Erica? She sighed, exasperated, as if I was an inconvenience. Something in her way. Someone beneath her. You wouldn't understand, Nathan. You never did. Her hands rested on her hips, her designer dress hugging her figure, her eyes sharp and calculating. Once those eyes held love. Once they softened when they looked at me. Now I was just another liability she had decided to cut from her portfolio. Try me, I said, my fists clenched at my sides. She smirked. A condescending, triumphant little smirk that made my blood boil. You're a good man, Nathan. But good men don't belong in a world like this. You think integrity builds empires? No. She shook her head, stepping closer. Her heels clicked against the marble floor, punctuating each syllable. Power does. Ruthlessness does. And she motioned to herself, her manicured fingers splayed against her chest. I am finally stepping into the role I was born for. I let out a bitter laugh, though there was no humor in it. Stepping into a role? And what am I, Erica? Dead weight. Her smirk widened. That was all the confirmation I needed. My stomach clenched, my throat dry. I had seen warning signs over the past year. Small shifts in her behavior. A chilling detachment when we spoke. I thought it was stress. I thought it was the demands of the company we had built together. I had been a fool. I had been the supporting act in a show she never intended to share. I built this company with you, I said, my voice low, barely concealing the rage simmering beneath the surface. I put in just as much sweat, just as much time. She rolled her eyes. And I'll make sure you're compensated. I'm not cruel, Nathan. Not cruel? The audacity of the woman standing before me was staggering. You're throwing away our marriage. Our life. Her expression didn't change. If anything, she looked bored. Nathan, our marriage was a convenience. You grounded me when I needed stability. But now, she tilted her head, her expression almost pitying. You're not what I need anymore. I could have handled hatred better than indifference. I took a deep breath, trying to collect myself. Who is he? She blinked, feigning innocence. Who? I scoffed. Don't play dumb, Erica. There's always someone. Some rich asshole promising you more. She smirked again, and this time, it reached her eyes. She wanted me to know. There's no one, she said smoothly, but the flicker of amusement in her gaze told me everything I needed to know. There was someone. I just hadn't figured out who yet. But I would. The realization hit me like a freight train. She had been planning this for months. The late nights, the business trips, the secret phone calls. I had been too blinded by loyalty, too stupidly devoted, to see the betrayal forming right under my nose. I turned away, my heart hammering in my chest, my hands shaking. So that's it? You're done with me? She exhaled dramatically. Nathan, don't make this harder than it needs to be. I turned back to face her. Harder for who, Erica? You? Or me? Her lips pressed into a thin line. The mask of amusement slipped, and in its place, there was irritation. That depends. Are you going to act like a child about this? I clenched my jaw. You want me out of my own company? The one we built together. She didn't hesitate. Yes. And the house. She raised a brow. You mean my penthouse? I felt my breath hitch. My penthouse. The one I had designed. The one I had poured my soul into. The one we had stood in together, dreaming of our future. She had already rewritten history. In her mind, I never mattered. I should have seen this coming, I muttered, shaking my head. She softened only slightly. Nathan, you're a good man, but you'll never make the hard choices. And that's why you'll always be small. That word sliced through me. Small. Insignificant. A nobody. You're going to regret this, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Her laughter was light, mocking. I doubt it. I stared at her, memorizing the moment. The way she looked at me like I was nothing. The way she had discarded me so effortlessly. Fine. She wanted me out? I'd leave. But not as a broken man. I'd leave as the storm she never saw coming. I turned without another word, heading for the door. Wait, she called, amusement dripping from her tone. Aren't you going to take your things? I stopped, exhaling through my nose, controlling the rage. I turned just enough to look at her over my shoulder. Keep them. They belong to the past. And I'm about to build something bigger than you could ever imagine. Then I walked out. And that was the last time Erica had control over me. She thought she had won. She thought I was weak. She thought I was done. But she was wrong. So wrong. And soon she would know it. I don't remember much about that first night. After I walked out of the penthouse, the one I designed, furnished, and paid for, I just drove. Nowhere in particular. The city lights blurred past, and my mind kept replaying the scene like a broken film reel. You're not what I need anymore. You'll always be small. Her voice echoed in my head, each word digging deeper into my chest. I had given that woman everything. I built her career with my own 2 hands, invested in her dreams, sacrificed years of my life to make sure she had a seat at the table. And this was my reward? Tossed aside, traded up, replaced. At some point, I pulled over to a deserted gas station and just sat there, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. The anger was thick, suffocating. But beneath that, buried under layers of shock and heartbreak, something else was beginning to stir. Not just rage, not just betrayal, something colder, a resolve. Erica thought she had destroyed me. She thought she had won. She had no idea who she had just betrayed. The next few weeks were hell. I didn't just lose my wife. I lost everything. My company? Gone. She had worked me out of the board, making sure my name was wiped from every major decision. My accounts? Frozen, thanks to legal loopholes and strategic moves I hadn't seen coming. Even my personal savings had taken a hit, tied up in lawsuits she orchestrated before I even walked out the door. She planned this. For months. I was blindsided, left scrambling for a foothold while she ascended her corporate throne. No house, no company, no money. I spent my first few nights crashing in a rundown motel, the neon sign outside flickering like some kind of cruel metaphor. The air stank of mildew, and the bed felt like a pile of rocks. But I didn't care. I was too busy watching, studying. Every night I tracked her movements, her press appearances, the smug interviews where she talked about her company's vision for the future, the investors she was bringing in, the power players she was aligning herself with. And then I found him. James Godfrey, billionaire, ruthless, the kind of man who devours people like Erica for breakfast. He was the new power behind her throne, and the reason she didn't flinch when she threw me away. The real betrayal wasn't just Erica tossing me aside. It was that she had aligned herself with someone even bigger, even stronger. Someone who could ensure that I never made a comeback. And that's when the switch flipped. That's when I stopped mourning and started building. The thing about hitting rock bottom is that there's only one direction left to go. I wasn't going to survive. I was going to thrive. I cashed in every favor. Reached out to every contact I still had. The ones who didn't side with Erica. The ones who saw her for what she really was, a power-hungry opportunist. I found new investors, private backers, people who wanted revenge just as much as I did, because Erica hadn't just screwed me over. She had stepped on a lot of people on her way up. And those people, they were more than happy to help me burn down everything she had built. I started from scratch. A new company, a new network. I worked harder than I ever had in my life. While she was out celebrating her success in 5-star restaurants, I was in small, dimly lit offices grinding. While she smiled for cameras, basking in the attention, I was pulling together something she would never see coming. I worked in shadows, She worked in the spotlight, and soon she would realize, the biggest threat is the one you never see until it's too late. 3 months after she threw me out, I made my first move. She had a major investor deal coming up, something that would launch her even further into power. It was all over the business news. The merger of a lifetime. She was confident, smug, untouchable. And then, the deal fell apart. Because I took it from her. She never saw it coming. While she was busy basking in her victory, I had been working in the background, whispering in the right ears, cutting the right deals. And when she walked into that boardroom, expecting to sign the final papers, I was already there, sitting at the table, smiling, watching as her face drained of color. Surprise, honey. Her jaw clenched. Nathan. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the polished wood. Oh, don't stop on my account. I'm just here to witness the moment you realize you didn't bury me. You built me. She was speechless. For the first time in her life, she had nothing to say. I let the silence stretch. Let her feel it. You thought I was small? I chuckled, shaking my head. You should have killed me when you had the chance, Erica. Because now. I leaned in, my voice dropping lower. I'm just getting started. She didn't speak at first. Erica, the woman who once commanded boardrooms with razor-sharp wit and an unshakable confidence, was silent. I savored it. The boardroom was dead quiet. All those investors, the powerful figures she had so carefully cultivated, sat in stunned silence. The contract, the one she had spent months brokering, lay untouched on the table. She should have been signing it. She should have been securing her next empire. But instead, she was staring at me, because this wasn't her victory anymore. It was mine. I watched her fingers twitch, a small, subtle movement, the only sign that she was rattled. And then, like a true professional, she schooled her expression. Her lips curled into a smirk, and she tilted her head as if she were merely amused. Nathan, she said, her voice smooth, controlled. I have to admit, I didn't expect to see you here. Liar. She never expected to see me anywhere after she discarded me. I leaned back, letting the leather chair creak beneath me. I imagine you didn't. She turned her gaze to the executives across the table, the ones who were now looking at me instead of her. This is a misunderstanding, she said, flashing that charming, polished smile. Nathan and I have some history, but I cut her off with a chuckle. She hated that. This isn't a misunderstanding, Erica, I said. This is business. Her jaw tightened. I glanced at the man sitting next to me, the lead investor she had been desperate to secure. Apologies for the disruption, Richard, I said smoothly. But I believe we've already spoken at length about this opportunity. Richard nodded, glancing at Erica before clearing his throat. Yes, Nathan made a very compelling offer. Given the circumstances, I think it's best that we reconsider our direction. That was it. The moment I saw the first crack. It was subtle, a flicker of disbelief, the slight shift of her shoulders, the way her fingers curled into a fist for just a second before she forced them to relax. She was losing. She just didn't know how badly yet. She turned back to me, her expression carefully neutral. Nathan, if you wanted a meeting, you could have simply scheduled one. There was no need to. I stood up, buttoning my suit jacket. I didn't need a meeting, Erica. I just needed to make sure you understood one thing. She lifted her chin, still grasping at the last shreds of control. And what's that? I leaned in, just enough that only she could hear my next words. This is only the beginning. And then I walked out. That meeting was just the first domino, and I had spent months setting them up one by one. Erica had built her empire on ambition, connections, and power moves. But she had also made enemies. She thought burning bridges made her untouchable. She was wrong. I spent weeks unraveling her world. Her most trusted financial advisor? I lured him away with a better offer. He took everything he knew about her weaknesses with him. The media outlets she used to control her public image? I fed them just enough dirt to make them start asking the right questions. The board members who had backed her takeover of our company? They started pulling their support, one by one. And the best part? She never saw me coming. I wasn't fighting her in the open. I wasn't challenging her in press conferences or calling her out in interviews. I was eroding her foundation from the inside. And it was working. The first time she made a public misstep, it was barely a ripple. A small lawsuit, a former employee alleging mismanagement. She brushed it off, confident it would go away. But then another one followed. And then another. Suddenly, her perfect empire wasn't so perfect anymore. Her stocks dipped. Investors started pulling out. Rumors swirled about inconsistencies in her company's financials. And the best part? She still didn't know who was pulling the strings. Not yet. It happened on a Tuesday night. I was in my new office. A sleek, minimalist penthouse suite overlooking the city. When my assistant buzzed in. "Sir, Erica Langford is here to see you." I set my pen down, a slow smile curling at the edges of my lips. "Finally. She has no appointment," my assistant added, her voice hesitant. I leaned back in my chair, exhaling slowly. Let her in. The moment Erica stepped inside, I knew she wasn't here for business. Her usual composure was cracked. Not broken. Not yet. But there was a tightness in her posture, a flicker of something I hadn't seen before, something close to uncertainty. She closed the door behind her, crossing her arms as she studied me. "You've been busy," she said finally. I said nothing, just watched. She took a step closer, her eyes narrowing. "I know you're behind this." I raised an eyebrow. "Behind what?" Her lips pressed together. "Don't play dumb, Nathan. You think you're clever, don't you? You think you can ruin me?" I tilted my head, pretending to consider it. "Ruin you? Now why would I do that? It's only business, honey." The way her eyes flashed with fury was satisfying. I stood up, walking toward her slowly. "You underestimated me, Erica. That was your first mistake." She scoffed. "And what's my second mistake?" I smirked, thinking I was finished. She held her ground, but I could see it now. The tiny hint of fear behind her confidence. She had never imagined I would come back stronger. Never imagined that I would outmaneuver her. But now, she was starting to realize. And soon, she was going to watch everything she stole from me crumble into dust. For the first time since she betrayed me, Erica was losing control. She hid it well. Her posture still sharp, her voice still smooth, her makeup flawless. But her eyes betrayed her. There was no mistaking it now. She was scared. I leaned against my desk, arms crossed, watching as she tried to piece together what was happening. "Nathan," she started, her tone shifting to something almost conciliatory, almost pleading. I let her speak. I wanted to hear how she thought she could still spin this. "I know we've had our differences." She forced a tight smile. "But this isn't good for either of us. We don't have to do this. We were partners once. We can be again." I let out a slow, measured breath. There it was. The bargaining phase. First, she thought I was weak. Then, she thought I was irrelevant. Now, she wanted me back. I almost laughed. Instead, I pushed off my desk and stepped closer, lowering my voice just enough to make sure she understood every word. "You didn't want a partner, Erica. You wanted a pawn." She flinched just barely, but I saw it. I took another step forward. "You thought you could erase me and that I'd stay buried." Her lips parted, but I kept going. "You called me small, said I'd never make the hard choices, that I'd never be ruthless enough." I tilted my head, studying her. "Tell me, Erica, how does it feel to realize you were wrong?" Her fingers curled into a fist. "This isn't over," she whispered. That made me smile. She didn't even believe herself. I walked past her and took a seat behind my desk, exuding the control she had lost. "Oh, but it is," I said. "You just haven't accepted it yet." She straightened her shoulders, forcing herself back into the mask of composure. "You can still walk away from this, Nathan. Take what you've gained and leave the past behind." I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my desk. "You know, that's almost convincing. But let me ask you something." I folded my hands. "Would you have stopped if the roles were reversed?" She didn't answer. She didn't need to. We both knew the truth. She would have buried me without a second thought. So why the hell would I give her mercy now? I didn't need to destroy her personally. All I had to do was let the truth do its work. While Erica was scrambling, trying to keep her empire from collapsing, I made my final move. It came in the form of a press leak. A well-placed journalist, eager to break a major story. A former employee, one of many who had been discarded the same way I was, ready to share everything. And then the headlines dropped. Scandal at Langford Industries. Corruption, embezzlement, and the rise of a ruthless CEO. Within hours, her entire world was on fire. Her stock tanked. Her investors bailed. Her company, our company, was in freefall. And then came the SEC investigation. Because Erica had done more than just betray me. She had cut corners, lied on financial reports, manipulated stockholders. I hadn't even needed to plant the evidence. It was already there. All I did was make sure the right people found it. 2 weeks later, I walked into the very building she once ruled. The same office where she had thrown me out. And this time, security was escorting her out. She was dressed immaculately, as always, but the aura of power was gone. Her steps were measured, but her hands were clenched at her sides. The whispers followed her, the glances filled with pity and satisfaction. I waited in the lobby, leaning against the marble column, watching as she walked through the doors. She stopped the moment she saw me. For the first time, there was no confidence. No smirk, just cold, hard fury. I pushed off the column and met her halfway. The guards hesitated, but she waved them off. "What do you want?" she spat. I took my time, letting her feel the weight of her downfall. "You know, I was going to let you walk away with some dignity," I said. "But then I remembered, you never gave me that option." Her jaw tightened. "You think you've won?" I smiled. "Oh, I don't think, Erica. I know." Her eyes darkened. She was seething. But this time, she had no power left. No company. No allies. No empire. Nothing. And I wanted her to feel every second of it. I leaned in slightly, just enough that only she could hear me. "You never should have underestimated me." Then, just like that night in the penthouse, I turned and walked away. The difference? This time I was the one leaving her behind. I never saw Erica again after that day. I didn't need to. Her downfall was absolute. The scandal buried her reputation beyond repair. Every corporate board that once fawned over her, every investor that once lined up to fund her ventures, every journalist that once sang her praises, they all turned on her. She became radioactive. The last I heard, she had fled the city. Rumors swirled about where she ended up. Some said she tried to move abroad, seeking new business opportunities in places where her name still held some weight. Others said she was living in a small apartment, barely scraping by, drowning in legal fees and bad debts. I never bothered to find out which was true, because by the time she finally realized the full extent of her loss, I had already moved on. My company, the one I built from the ground up after she cast me aside, was thriving. Stronger, leaner, more powerful than anything I had created with Erica. I was no longer the man she threw away. I was something else entirely. Something she never could have predicted. I had power now, real power. The kind that wasn't just built on ruthless ambition but on calculated precision. The kind that couldn't be stolen. And the best part? I did it without becoming her. I never cheated. I never cut corners. I never burned bridges that didn't deserve to be burned. Unlike Erica, I didn't have to destroy people to succeed. I only destroyed the ones who deserved it. One day, months after her empire had crumbled, my assistant handed me an envelope. No return address. No signature. Just my name written in her handwriting. I already knew who it was from. I let it sit on my desk for hours, untouched. When I finally opened it, there was only a single sheet of paper. A short message. No excuses. No pleas for forgiveness. No attempts to fight back. Just 6 words. "You were never small, were you?" I stared at it for a long time. And then, I smiled. And I threw it away. Because I didn't need her validation. Not anymore. A year later, I was at a high-profile event. One of those black-tie charity galas where the city's wealthiest gathered to show off their influence. As I made my rounds, shaking hands and exchanging pleasantries, I caught a glimpse of a familiar face across the room. Took me a second to recognize her. Erica, but not the Erica I once knew. Gone was the confident, untouchable woman who had ruled boardrooms with an iron grip. She looked older, tired, diminished. She was speaking to a group of mid-tier executives, not power players. Not the kind of people she used to surround herself with. It hit me then. She wasn't there as a guest. She was hustling, trying to claw her way back into relevance. And failing. I let my gaze linger just long enough for her to notice me. And when she did, for the first time in her life, she looked away first. I didn't approach her. I didn't need to, because that moment, that was my victory. I had already won. And she knew it. As I walked out of the gala that night, I thought about who I used to be. The man who once loved her. The man who once believed in her. The man she thought she could break. That man was gone. And in his place, someone she never saw coming. Someone unstoppable. She once said I'd always be small. Now, she was the one who had to live in my shadow. And that was the perfect revenge. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments, and do not forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel.